video. So first up, you got some cylinders in the mail. These ones are some generic 201 cylinders. These ones will be good for making challenge locks, assuming I ever get around to making it. But also got some Lockwood ones and some different variations. So got this one with has the standard keyway, and then you got this one again, same standard keyway, but as you can tell, both visually different and used in different applications. And then of course we've got this one, which looks a bit older, and you can tell has a different keyway, which is interesting. I've never had one of these ones before. So it's nice to have one in the collection. You can tell this one's also much older because of the bit at the back, whereas these ones use a clip. This one uses this bit of metal there. See, this one also uses a clip. Also got another ABUS 83. This one's an 8350, but this is my first one with a Bilock core. I'm not sure what rank Bilock it is. I'll have to pick it first and gut it so that I can tell what rank it is. But nice to have one of those finally in the collection. And just today have 4 of the Masterlock 411s. Stiff, there we go. So keep an eye out for video with these guys. Nice long body. And as well as the mail call, I'm sure those who read the post recall that I wanted to say something about something in particular. So on Monday, for those who weren't aware, it was Auslan Day. Auslan is the national sign language of this country. It originated in the 19th century, and it wasn't until 1987 that it was recognized as a legitimate language, and therefore given some kind of prominence by the government, meaning that the government would actually, make sure that deaf kids could learn the language in school, and they would have services that, like interpreters and whatnot, so they can learn like everyone else. Auslan is of course related to British Sign Language, and much like British Sign Language, it uses a two-handed alphabet as opposed to ASL, American Sign Language, which only uses a one-handed alphabet. And forgive me, this is going to look weird, but that's only because I'm behind the camera. But with ASL, it's A, S, L. But for Auslan, A, U. So yeah, you got A, U, S, L, A, N. So Auslan. Now I also wanted to the other reason why I wanted to do a video on this is because Auslan, while it is the most commonly used sign language, it is not the only sign language that exists in this country. For thousands of years, Indigenous Aussies also had their own sign languages. Now, compared to Auslan, which is a deaf sign language, most Indigenous sign languages, well, they can and are used by the deaf community, what are called alternative sign languages. So basically alternative forms of communication. So for things like hunting or initiation ceremonies, or even grieving, you could sign instead of speak. So as an example, in Indigenous culture, we have this belief where you don't say the name of someone who is deceased. So as Stephen Oliver put it, when you say someone's name, you keep them here and they become trapped. Their spirit becomes trapped and they can't get to where they need to. But when you say their name in your mind, you keep them in a world of infinite possibilities, and they can freely travel to where and get to where they need to. So, because of that belief, not being able to speak someone's name, having a sign language where you could sign during the times of mourning was, of course, deeply integral in Indigenous cultures. Another thing that is interesting about Indigenous sign languages is that some Indigenous sign languages don't mirror spoken language. As an example, the Yolngu sign language does not mirror their spoken languages, and that's because they have, in part because they have multiple different languages that are spoken, and those languages are not mutually intelligible. The thing that makes all Yolngu is the fact that they practice the same culture, but the languages in which they speak from clan to clan are completely different. So, hence why the sign language does not mirror any languages, because it's one sign language that they can all use to speak regardless of the mother tongue in which they speak. But of course, on the flip side, there are also several Indigenous sign languages that do mirror the spoken language, like the Gurindji sign language does mirror the spoken language. So what this means is, for every spoken word in the Gurindji language, there is a corresponding sign. Whereas for non-mirrored sign languages, there are certain spoken words that will not have a sign for them, meaning that when you're signing, using the sign language to speak, it's a lot more different, because obviously there are some words that don't have signs, and therefore you have to kind of go about it a different way when you're trying to make a certain point or get a certain point across or say something in particular. Of course, many Indigenous sign languages, unfortunately, extinct, and those that are still alive are heavily endangered. This is in part because of colonization, but also because of the 1880 Milan Conference, which thanks to influential assholes like the guy who invented the telephone, sign languages were demonized, and it was basically believed by these people that the use of sign languages would hinder deaf people being integrated into spoken society. So they basically got deaf schools to ban people from using sign languages, and when kids tried to use their sign language, they would be punished for it. And so sign languages all around the world, some that had existed for a couple of hundred years, some that had existed for several thousand years, would all be demonized, and the people who used them would be punished for using those languages. Give me one sec. Sorry, I have to get a drink. So, and because of this, because of this, it has greatly impacted those sign languages, which, unlike Auslan, have not managed to recover. Yeah. As well as Auslan and Indigenous Sign Languages, one of the other unique sign languages here in Oz is Aussie Irish Sign Language, which was originally brought here in 1875 by some nuns, and it was taught as an instructional language predominantly by Catholic schools up until the 50s, when it was later replaced by Auslan. And due to its isolation here in Oz, it basically developed into its own distinct variant of Irish Sign Language. As of today, there are roughly 100 users of this sign language. Most of them are quite elderly, so former students of these Catholic schools. And of course, some of their family members also use it too. But because it's no longer being widely taught as an instructional language, just like Indigenous Sign Languages, it is heavily endangered and at risk of going extinct. And unfortunately, unlike Auslan, which in the National Policy on Languages is included in that policy, Indigenous Sign Languages and Irish Sign Languages are not included in that policy. They're largely ignored. So the government basically just ignores those languages, and which is, again, partly why they still continue to struggle, not just for recognition, but also to stay alive, even in 2026, unfortunately. But of course, hopefully, with more people being educated about these sign languages, hopefully we can change that and protect these unique sign languages. Yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say on that. But if you're interested in Indigenous Sign Languages, I will leave a link in the description to a website that you can look at, learn a bit about different Indigenous Sign Languages. They have posters, videos, and stuff, so you can learn a bit, just if you're curious. And yeah, peace. Alright, so one thing I missed before that I forgot to include was the influence that Indigenous people have had on Auslan. So, as an example, in Auslan, the sign for Oz is this. So it's basically something being picked up and dropped, while the origins of that sign are uncertain. It's believed to be a reference to convicts, like literally being picked up and dumped here. So it doesn't really do a good job at representing the entire country. So the Deaf Indigenous Institute group developed. Give me one sec. Oh, sorry. Came up with a much better sign, which can be used. Which is this. So if you imagine your hand is basically Oz, here you have like Queensland, and then got all the little cities around here, and in the middle you've got Uluru, the big red rock. So you move your hand around the country, and then you have the big rock in the middle. And this represents the entire country as opposed to just a small piece of the country. So I thought I'd just add that. Sorry I didn't include that before. The more you know, really. Peace.